In this video, we'll review how to configure a CitraTest VU load test so that each VU can use separate runtime parameters. For example, in this script, it logs into the application with a username and a password, and we can see in this script that currently the username and password are literal hard-coded strings. But of course, if we take this script and we play it over 100 or 200 VUs, we would need each virtual user to use a different username and password. So we need to send different parameters to each virtual user during the load test. If we look at a CitraTest VU load test, we can see that we'll have a number of different CitraTest VU sessions or VU desktops. Each one of these represents an individual user's desktop during the load test. Each one of these desktops runs a unique agent number starting with 4500. That agent number is what we're going to use as a key to send the different runtime parameters to each virtual user. And we can do that using external data files. For example, if we want to configure a data file to store different runtime parameters, such as login and password for each virtual user, we can do that with an INI formatted file. You can have a simple INI file with section title and then string equals value. And each section can be titled with the agent numbers starting with 4500. Each one of those agent numbers represents an individual virtual user. Inside of each session, we can store the different username and password strings that we want to assign for that particular virtual user. So once this INI file is built, we want to program the script to read from that file, and then based on which agent number the script is running as, pull back the appropriate username and password string and any other string values you might put within that section. And then once we do that, we're going to take those variables that catch the return values and put those into the script in place of these literal strings. So let's scroll to the top and do that. We've already defined the variables, so we have our dim statement. We're going to use two variables, username and password. Next thing we're going to do is go to the scripting ribbon, and underneath the input parameters menu, we have a function that's designed to read settings from INI files. We'll browse to the file. In this case, it's called VU Logins. We're going to pick the section title first. This will be changed, as you'll see, once we insert it to the code. Then we're going to pick the entry within that section that we want to retrieve, in this case, username. It then inserts the read INI setting function to the code. One thing we want to change is the section title. We want to make that the agent number system variable. This is simply a CitraTest system variable that the script will pick up during the load test, and this number will represent which VU session the script is running as. So I can take this one script and run it in a 200 VU load test, and each instance of the script will use a different agent number starting at 4500. The script will then go into that INI file, go to the appropriate section, and pull back its own different username and password credentials. The other thing we want to do is catch the return value into the user variable. And we would simply repeat this function to query the file and capture the password setting from the appropriate section. So now we've simply used a basic INI file, and it can be constructed with however many sections you need for your load test based on how many virtual users you'll have. And then in each section, you can assign the different username and passwords. Once that file is built, again, we would use read INI setting to query that file, query the section within the file based on the runtime agent number, query the entry within that section, and then return that to a script variable. Once those variables are populated, we simply place those into our keystroke statements instead of the previous quoted literal strings. So now this script is intelligent enough to run simultaneously across 200 or however many VU sessions you have. We can also use the same method to read in more transactional-based data. For example, let's say that our script transaction is tasked with typing in different input parameters as part of the workflow. Well, currently this script is hard-coded to use the same input parameters, and again, we might require each virtual user to type in separate data, i.e. separate runtime parameters. For this type of data, we could use something like a CSV formatted file. In this format, you have the section titles with agent numbers again, but these sections are stored as two-dimensional data tables, as you see here, with the first row being column titles. You can have any number of data rows inside each section. And then once this file is created and saved as CSV, we can go back to the script and we can read that section based on which agent number the script is running as. This would be input parameters, read data from CSV file. And again, we'll pick the first section, but we're going to change that in the script to agent number. This particular function, read data records, will go to that file, to the name section, and read in all the rows and all the columns that it finds. So in this case, we have 4 rows and 4 columns of data. And that becomes a two-dimensional data table called A data records. The commented code that is inserted to the script is prompting us to do a few different things. First off, it's letting us know that we can do a loop to repeat the workflow for each row that it finds in the data table. Secondly, it's prompting us to copy the row and cell from the data table into a script variable. So we're going to use 3 script variables to get 3 columns from that particular data table, last name, first name, and MRN. So we know that the first column in every row is the last name. We know that the second column is the first name, and the MRN was actually in the 4th column. So this code will repeat a loop for each row that it finds in that data table. Each time through the loop, it's going to reset the variables based on the next row of data. Now the only thing left to do is to put the end of the loop, the next statement, at the bottom of our script. And also to take these variables that we just populated, slast, sfirst, and smrn, and put those into our script to replace the literal hard-coded strings that were being used before. So now we have a script that's intelligent enough to run across any number of VU sessions, and based on the agent number that the script is running as, it can go out to separate data files, whether it's an INI file or whether it's a CSV file, and pull back different runtime parameters that have been assigned to each virtual user. And this gives you a much more realistic load test in that each instance of the script or each virtual user can act as a completely different user.